So hopefully we'll have other opportunities to see your film.
I think this is the second time it's been shown in public. It's hard to get films like this shown anymore.
I remember back in the 1980s and 90s, John Jost films used to play fairly regularly in San Francisco, the Art Institute, the Roxy Theater, and that was always the high point of the month when my friends and I saw that on the schedule. I remember about 30 years seeing your Plain Talk and Common Sense, I think, and I asked you why at the end of that movie, it's a black and white final sequence, there's a red line on the side of the frame, and you said it's to keep it interesting for you, to hold your attention.
Yeah.
And I'm struck that every single frame of his films, and this is not the only film that this is the case, is quite beautiful, fascinating in its own right, painterly. So you have a real visual flair and an interesting, I think, relationship with landscapes. How did you decide on this film and this particular place?
Well, I knew the area because I lived there for a while in Port Hadlock, otherwise locally known as Port Hardlock, because of the kind of people who live there, like me. And Steve lived there, and I visited Steve quite often and stayed at his house a number of times. And way in the back of it was there's a distributor named Marcus who originally came from San Francisco, I believe, had a thing called Strand Releasing, which is essentially mostly gay films, and not just, but mostly gay films or unmarketable Euro art films. And he was always pressing me to make a gay film, and so I thought, well, okay, we'll make a gay film. I didn't make it for him, but it was sort of, okay, we'll make a gay film. And somehow in the back of my head, I didn't have a story. I just had, okay, a gay couple breaking up. That's all I had going for it. Everything they said was improvised, essentially around. There was a backstory because John Mano used to be the director of the community theater in Port Angeles, and he had done a casting call, and Steve had gone to the casting call for some play he wanted to be in. Steve also was director for this thing, and apparently, typical theater stuff, they did a casting call, but the guy already knew who he wanted, and it wasn't Steve. So then Steve got pissed off. And I think that, tension, there was clearly, between them, there was clearly a tension. So it played good for a bickering, bitchy, gay couple. And basically, Steve inverted the roles of his own partner, right? He played his partner in what the kinds of things they brought up and talked about. It was all straight out of his life, except being on the other side of the fence. I don't know what makes me do films. It certainly isn't to make any money, and certainly with films like this, it's because I don't know what else. I'm finally learning what else to do. Maybe nothing. I'm about ready to say.
There's certainly not the first of your films that deals with relationships or tensions in relationships. I think there's quite a few films like that.
Yeah, I would say very many of them deal with tensions in couples or tensions in, whatever. One of my earlier third feature film. Keep in mind, I did make shorts for 10 years before I made any features. Last Chance for a Slow Dance, which is one of the ones that's better known, and I do make a little money off of it because it was published in a book called, referenced in a book called 1001 Films You Must See Before You Die. And so about, 2 or 3 times a month, sometimes once a month, I'll get this, "You're the last one. I finally found you. I want a copy." And so I say, "Okay, now you can die." But that was about, it wasn't so much about a couple, it was just about an asshole guy, which there's plenty in the world.
And the title of that film, Last Chance, is Chants. It's a sort of a pun, I suppose.
Well, it was named that because it had like 6 or 7 of my songs in it, and the songs were an integral part of the narrative. So it was, it's a nice rhyme. Last chance for a slow dance has double meaning, seeming orally anyway, and it was the last songs for a slow dance.
One of the remarkable things, as you just witnessed, is the role of music in John Jost's films. The film I saw just before this, They Had It Coming.
Yeah.
I believe you're singing in that.
Yeah,
also,
that's my stuff.
Which is it was quite moving in the film. And then when the credits came up, I thought, oh, that's amazing. That's the director himself singing. I thought, who is that singer? Just the whole oral dimension of the film is also very, I was quite struck in this film. For weeks after seeing it, I heard the Debussy playing in my head. And likewise, it's interesting.
That was all just happenstance. It happened John played harp, and I'm not going to let that go. And it happened that Steve flew an airplane, and I'm not going to let that go. So it's just sort of, I had no story when it began. It was like, oh, you play harp? Well, let's see if we can weave that in. I have a filmmaker friend, Mark Rappaport, who loved Coming to Terms, the film, 2 films before this one. And then I sent him this one, Mark is Gay, and he said he absolutely loathed this film.
This film?
because he said, who would want to spend 2 minutes around these bitchy guys? To which I concur, yeah, this is true. And then he told me, and I hate harp music, and I hate wind chimes. So I said, well, I guess I hit the trifecta. Yeah, it's funny.
I actually love the wind chimes because to me, it kind of transitioned from the sounds and the sights of water, the sounds of nature. And then the wind chimes are sort of, if you might say, are played by nature because it's the wind is playing it. And then you go to the harp, and there seems this whole tension between how we are living our lives against a backdrop of nature, and nature's doing some of it. We're pushed and pulled by these forces, and then we ourselves are, creating this fragile existence there. I thought, the different images that you had really nicely summarized that, and.
Shall we ask her some questions?
Yes. Questions from the audience.
Ellie, here's the mic.
Hi. I don't think I need this. I can.
Okay.
Yeah.
She can project.
We're recording.
You're
recording?
Oh, so you'll have to use this?
I'll do my best. I'm sure the first film I saw by you was Rembrandt Laughing. Could you say a little bit about what that film meant to you, or the experience of making the film? Anything at all about it? I love that film.
Well, it was made like most of my films with my friends. In this case, it was normally I make films in 2 or 3 weeks. In Rembrandt Laughing, I wanted to take a long time, and I told everybody who was involved. Most of them were friends of mine. A few of them were friends of mine who got brought into the film, and I just told them, well, I want to take our time, and when you have an afternoon off and can give me an afternoon, then we'll shoot. And so that film, I don't really remember how long it took, maybe 6 months, I don't really remember. But it was very casually done. I think it was done in order, and there was no script. I had a central idea for it, which was I wanted to tell a story by leaving gaps in it. So the film starts on a Sunday morning, it goes to the next Monday later in the morning, and it's going through characters as it's doing this, and basically you're going, each scene is a progression in time through a day until I think you get to Thursday, and then it jumps a week. So we don't know what happened in that week, in between week, and then it jumps a month. We don't know what happened in that, and then it jumps a year, and one of our lead characters has died, and things like that. But we're not giving any, we're not told how, why, what. It's just you find out, okay, one of the people's dead, and in fact, the person who's dead, I just spent the afternoon with him looking at his gorgeous films, Nathaniel Dorsky. So it was a concept about using time as a structure, but the story was, just improvised and made up along the way with things like, it was shot in, where are you, Barbara? There's Barbara. It was shot in Barbara's apartment, and it was shot, it was just shot in places, just my friends' places or where they worked, and it's just put together like that. I don't think the way I imagine myself making films usually is that I'm going along the street and I have a vague idea and I find a piece here and a piece there, and it's like a jigsaw puzzle. And I say, until I get enough pieces and say, okay, now let's put the jigsaw puzzle together and see what comes out of it. And so usually I don't know what the end of the film is going to be until we get to shooting the end. Then we'll go, oh, I guess that's the end. And so it's I guess a very different approach than most filmmaking is. And Rembrandt Laughing is one of my personal favorites. It's also one of the most painful for me to watch because John English, who played the lead guy, is dead. Roger Ruffin is dead. There's just, I go over the 3 or 4 people in the film are dead. So that's a little. And John not only played the lead role, but he did music for 4 or 5 of my films. And so it's a little hard to look at, but I like the film. It's one of my few warm films, right? The central tone of it is quite warm and nice, about nice people.
Have you been based in San Francisco for some time when you made that film?
Not that long. I mean, I'm never based in anywhere very long. I think I don't. That was 89. I'd been in and out of San Francisco, I think, since 85, maybe 86, something like that. But a period, and then gone away for a year, and then whatever. So I've been familiar with San Francisco since '68 when I moved from the Midwest to the West Coast. Any other questions? I got one there.
This is the first film of yours that I've seen, and they're simply gorgeous. Had you intended from the beginning that the end be as violent?
No, I didn't really know what the end would be until we were a fair bit of the way through shooting, and then I thought, oh, well, you fly an airplane, you're depressed, so maybe crash the airplane, kill yourself. Kind of a trivial ending in my this film. I like it as an experiment to see how diffuse I could make a narrative and other things, but I don't really, it doesn't quite work for me. Right? But I think I don't think it's bad. It's just there's something about it that I just, and I haven't been able to figure out what it is. Right? I don't really understand what it is that I find a little problematic. But I like so much of it. I like the setting an ambient in which the story becomes not secondary, but even lower than that on the totem pole of import, and just sort of feel this stuff. And maybe that's my problem, is because the story with the guys is such a clash with the rest of the movie. I mean, the rest of it's beautiful and whatever, but that sort of makes it more interesting to have the friction between, here you are in this beautiful place and everything is so wonderful. You guys are acting like cats and dogs. And maybe I don't think when I make movies. I don't have ideas and think about them and say, "Oh, I'm trying to express this." I just get together enough pieces to make a movie and find out whatever that was in it, and that's, I guess, what I found out in this one.
Question? No. John, I think if you'd cut from the guy angrily flying his plane to the phone call and left out the discovery of the body, a la Rembrandt Laughing, it would have fixed it up. But that's just my advice. I'm sure you thought of it.
Yeah, I sort of agreed that the body on the beach should go, but I'm not interested in going back to it.
Questions? Okay, here we go.
I don't know much about you, John. I just want to tell you that I really enjoyed the movie. Kind of like an experience. I haven't seen movies like this so much, and it was exquisite as far as I'm concerned. Probably, I would agree. The I would have been perfectly happy without the ending. That part of it. I just love the gaps, the stillness within. Somehow everything worked. The nature and these two human beings somehow merged. I was reminded of like a kind of a holographic image that each part of it represents the whole. It was like every 5 minutes of it could have been satisfying in and of itself. And then the whole thing put together was, it was just lovely.
Thank you.
And I think you're an amazing man.
You're in the minority.
I don't care. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of how to ask this question. It has to do with the what you. I would like to hear you think about what you brought to this in terms of having it be a relationship between two men instead of heterosexual relationship. Because I think about in many of your films, and I think about Surefire, and I think of Bed You Sleep In, and I think to Coming to Terms, and I think of other films that are about males and male heads of households and patriarchs and failed patriarchs, and there seems to be something that you say in those films that has to do with patriarchal family structures and capitalism and American ideology that you implicate the landscape and the atmosphere in those films. And I saw you doing that with the landscape, and I felt it in the depressed environs of the place you were at, and I don't have any problems with seeing a male relationship fall apart or anything, but it's definitely stood out as a sort of a change of tone, and I'm wondering what you think about that. And I don't know if I have a clear question.
Well, the thing is, the things you say about the other films, but once again, I don't think about these things, right? I don't think, oh, I'm going to make a film about an asshole male patriarch in Utah. I don't think that. I just go to the place, soak up the vibes, get whatever's necessary to do it, and then it happens. There wasn't a script for Surefire. I didn't know the Surefire would end the way it ended until we got to the end. And it was like, oh, this is the right ending for it. And ditto the rest of the films, But it is, I am kind of, it's true that I'm very consistent, and usually at the end of my film, some characters are dead. But long ago I intellectualized that for myself. I said, you can't tell stories about life if you don't have death in it. Because implicit in any deep sense of life has got to be, it comes to an end, people die. Often not nice ways, and so long ago intellectually I thought, probably now I just feel that. I just feel, well, it isn't really full if you're going to do a film about human beings, it's got to be, death has to be snuck in it somewhere. Whether it's benign like in Rembrandt Laughing, somebody dies, but it's so discreet, some people don't even know somebody died when they look at Rembrandt Laughing. Because it's done so delicately that some people don't know that's his ashes in a jar at the end. And but it's just for ages, it's just like, to me, making I play stupid country western, right? I write my stupid country western songs. I play them and get much better than I used to be. I practiced a year in Ragusa, Italy with my new electric guitar. the thing is, if I'm playing music, and I'm certain it's true for any musician, if you think, you fuck up, right? And long ago, I began to address, okay, I'm making a film, and to me, it's like I'm playing music. And so I think basically at the point where I felt that I knew my instruments well enough. I knew a camera, I knew editing, I knew sound, I knew all that well enough to say that now I can just play, right? I don't need a crutch of a script. I don't need a storyboard. I can just walk in the room, and I'm so cinematic. I go, most of them, probably most people saw, say, All the Vermeers is the one maybe most people here might have seen. There are scenes in there that are 15 minutes of screen time that were shot in an afternoon, because I can go in a room and go, I want this, that night, and just patch it together cinematically, just very quickly. And so when I'm making a movie, I picked up my horn and I'm playing. And if I start thinking about what I'm playing, then I start having problems. And so, at least that for me, that's the approach I take. So, I did not write what those guys said. So I had and I didn't tell them that's what I wanted to say. I said, okay, you're a couple splitting up, right? And Steve's grabbed out of his life and John grabbed out of his, and they just basically squabbled about things that were very real to them. And I had no say about, I want you to say this to reflect something. No, I just wanted them to do whatever they did. So I didn't think about, but I didn't on the other ones either. I didn't do it on The Bed You Sleep In. I didn't think, I'm doing this thing about, it just happened because that's how I see the world, right? Or how I see America. And it's not intellectualized, it's.
Well, you're saying though that it just comes out. It just comes out again and again because that's the
way I see
that's the song that you have in you.
Well, that's how I see the world.
Sure.
I mean, in general, yeah. In general, males left to their own devices are pretty much assholes. What can we know about it?
And other films that have been really, it must have been like, is Plain Talk? Is that is more of a documentary about Four Corners in this, and this one is much more scripted than these narratives.
Plain Talk was scripted after the fact.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, I shot and then I wrote what I felt would, articulate something. But it wasn't scripted before. It was, it was scripted as I edited and thought, well, I got to say something here and whatever.
You have a question?
Yes. You're in light of that comment, you're short with Mitch Hampton takes on a whole new meaning for me.
Excuse me?
Your short film with Mitch Hampton playing the piano takes on a whole new meaning for me.
Okay.
He improvises that whole thing, I know, right?
Right.
But this actually, Blue Straight kind of reminded me of slow moves in a way, without as much of the humor, perhaps. But I was wondering, kind of a more utilitarian question: How did you arrive at the title of the film?
How did I? Well, it's shot on the Strait of San Juan de Fuca. Mm-hmm. You're talking about this film?
Yes.
Yeah. So it was shot in Port Angeles, which is on the Strait of San Juan de Fuca, which separates Canada from the U.S. Mm-hmm. And so it was a strait, and then because the general tonality was kind of down, blue, sad, whatever you want to call it. So I had played around with it. I had other things, but they all had blue in it. Plus, ages ago, like 40 years ago, I wanted to make a film on in the Southern California coast, Del Mar, Encinitas area, and that one was going to be, and I never got around to making it. And I wanted to call it Coastal Blues. So I sort of resurrected part of my title, and I don't think I consciously meant that the straight part of this would have other connotations. It would be spelled differently anyway.
Right. Any other questions? Oh, there you go. Do you ever watch mainline movies, and what do you look for if you do?
Basically, no, I do not. I do workshops and have taught at a university for 4 years in Korea. And I basically tell my students, I say, well, did you see this? Did you see that? And I say, if a film has an over-the-shoulder, back and forth, two people talking, if it has that, I'll just leave, right? Which means I leave 99% of films, because that's how most films are, grammatically structured, is that kind of, not, and it's not just that, it's other things that irritate me, and basically, I'm not really interested in films that are just about people. If there isn't something visually, cinematically going on that I have never seen before, like this afternoon, I spent 2 hours with Nathaniel Dorsky looking at his films in his basement, his newer films, and I kept seeing things I'd never seen before. But I know he can do that, so I have no problem sitting down to watch Nathaniel's films. And I don't want to see an ordinary film. I don't want to see a narrative film that's more or less conventional. And because at this point, I don't have that much time yet to live, and I certainly want to live it a different way than looking at boring movies that I already saw 3,000 times, right? In form and form and content, they're all more or less the same, right? And once in a while, you get a kick in the butt, and you'll see something where they actually did something. 3 or 4 years ago, there was an Oscar winner. The first time I ever liked an Oscar winner, and it was Birdman, because I saw something I'd never seen before, because I saw a well-executed single-take movie. Visually, it was a single continuous take without a cut in it, and it was excellently. The story I didn't care about. I didn't give a fuck about some guy like that. But the execution of making this seamless, continuous thing that put you over time, space, everything, and did it so well. As a person who makes films, I know how difficult it is, like, to have all that technical apparatus, and in that case particularly, all the actors were trapped in a highly technical box, and they had to look like as natural as could be, and they did it. You didn't see any actors waiting for the camera to come to them. When the camera came, life was going on. And I thought he executed that fantastically, even if I didn't give a shit about the story. And I did think he should have ended it at a different place. It should have ended when he shoots himself on the stage, the hospital, and well, that was silly, stupid. Anyway, so once in a while I'll go. The only reason I just said that. The reason I went to see that film, which normally I would not have gone to see that film, is I was in Lincoln, Nebraska. A guy I know who runs this Ross Cinema had been sitting in the thing with me, giving a workshop to some students, where I had said, if there's an over-the-shoulder shot, I leave, right? And he came up to me and said, John, you might want to see the movie going on the other side, because there isn't any over-the-shoulder shot. So I said, okay, I'll give it a try. And I really liked it, Other film I saw recently, 3 years ago, 4 years ago, I liked Leo Carax's Holy Motors. I thought that was a wonderful movie, which I think where, it played in big cities for a week and was gone. I was in Portland when I saw it, and it was there for 1 week. And when I went, there was like 3 people in the audience, because it was, a very well-produced, wonderfully acted experimental movie, basically. That's one way to look at it.
Questions? Yeah, lots of time. Don't worry about it.
One of the last interviews I read in the popular press or weekly press that published at the time, it's already been a few years now, but I remember you mentioning that you had to leave the country, that it was necessary to your filmmaking because of the environment here. And I wonder if you'd care to say anything about how that has developed for you over the years, and if everywhere else is catching up to us, or if it's still,
Well, I suspect this must have been at least 20 years ago.
It could have been
Yes?
about 15 at least. I'd
Okay.
say.
Well, I did go to Europe and stayed in Europe with never coming back to the States for 10 years, mostly in Portugal and Italy. And when I went, yes, it was true that the probability of being able to make movies on the scale of Oliver Mears or films like that was much better prospects over there. But more or less around the same time, just a little bit afterwards, at first digital video came along and basically relieved one of the having to deal with money people and thinking about money whatsoever. Not even, you don't have to think of a story that will recoup a little money, because in digital, this film cost me $200. Right? If it cost that, it probably didn't cost that. Plus, Steve's an excellent cook, and I was staying in his house, so I got fed, and he's really an excellent cook, so every time you sit down for a meal with him, you might as well be in a 5-star restaurant. So, I was eating $200 meals every night while I was there, and so I guess I didn't spend $200. I received $2,000 food. And so, yes, I went over there, but then digital video came along quickly. I did make a film over there in Italy. I had another that I was going to make in Austria, and was dealing with 2 asshole crooks, and I left after it had begun because they were just jerks. And then I decided I want nothing to do with this anymore. I've had enough of this kind of bad experience with people who's interested in money or the glamour of films or whatever it is. And digital came along, and then I've made, and that's very interesting. I jumped into digital well before it became, okay. I got into it in 1996, and when critics would write, oh, the gritty, they said it looked ugly. Well, actually, old digital video can look quite extraordinarily beautiful. I have friends who, Leighton Pierce makes extravagantly beautiful films in digital video. And, if you try to make it look like 35, then you're a stupid asshole. You shouldn't, although when it came out, people were desperately trying, how do we make the film look so it looks like a 35 millimeter movie, when it's instead this beautiful medium in and of itself that can look like nothing like a movie. It can look quite beautiful in a different way. And so I started making digital films. For example, I had an argument with the Berlin Festival, where I used to be a regular. And then I started working in digital. I said, well, yeah, we'll take your film, we'll put it in video sidebar. And I said, I don't want to go into video sidebar. Just because it's made on video doesn't mean it's somehow not as good as film. And these people are friends of mine, the Gregors. And, actually, I just had a lunch with them last year, and they said, well, John, you were right. Because I had a real run-in with them, because for 4 years I wouldn't accept my stuff, because I said, if you're going to show it, you show it just like it's a film. And they didn't do it, and then over dinner he said, well, John, you were right. The digital was the thing. And this is weird because of the festival that sort of specialized in avant-garde and blah, blah, blah. And you say, avant-garde, but we have to stay with celluloid no matter what? I mean, along comes another medium that allows you to do other things, and we can't experiment and play with that. So when I switched to DV, basically, since then I've had basically festivals don't want to show my work by and large. I have like 4 or 5 long films that have never been showed publicly because nobody wants to show the kind of films I'm doing, because festivals, along with most other venues for filmmaking, have all, whether they're conscious of it or not, become highly commercialized. And they're concerned about getting butts in seats, and certain kinds of films are not going to get butts in seats. It's that simple. So I went to Europe to whatever and take my chances, and then I decided to totally pull out of the film business as a business. And what I make for myself, and I have a cluster of actor friends who are happy to fly across the country and work for me for free. I give them a place to stay, and that's about all I can do for them. And I cook and I feed them, but I have a cluster of people who, you're making a film, John, please make another film. And at this point, I think I'm more or less ready to stop. I have 3 long films, none with actors, that I feel obliged to finish, and after that, I'm sort of, it's just doesn't make any sense anymore.
I'm hoping that doesn't happen. But what are the hopes of, regardless of that, getting some sort of retrospective locally, PFA, something?
These people all know me.
Cinematheque?
I don't think it will happen. Also, but doing a real retrospective of me now would be a major league job for any archive, because I have 40 long films and 3 more waiting in the wings, and that's a large bit of shit to do. Plus, I have 6 programs of short films at least, right? So I don't. Actually, I have thought over the last year that I sort of try to write a polite letter, which people think I have a reputation of not being polite, but that's stupid people's, where all this shit comes from. It's, once you're in the public eye, people say what they want. But I've been thinking that I should write all the archives of the world and say, well, one of you should maybe do this. It's like, I think my work's pretty good, and a lot of other people do. So, but then I look at my career and I say, here I am, 74 years old. I've made 40 films. I was at one point modestly well known, so it's not like I'm hiding under a rock. And there's never been one book written about my films. Not even been a long magazine article. And I wonder, what is it about my work that doesn't attract the kind of people who, there's a guy in London who's wrote some stuff, but maybe he'll end up doing a book. But it's clear that whatever I'm doing, academics are not attracted to this, even though I would look at it and say, ooh, it seems like such juicy meat to analyze and go blah, blah, blah. But it doesn't happen, so. Well, I think that's part of it is that, I don't make the same film again and again. Like James Benning is a good friend of mine, and he's being very successful right now in the art world and installations and all that. And he would be a case in point of, in the modern arts, if you make the same thing again and again and again, then you will get rewarded, because people, in a way, know what to expect, and they get it. And I really like James, and I like a lot of his films, and some of his films I find not interesting at all. I don't want to watch 21 people smoke a cigarette, for example. He's very, he makes some really wonderful films, and he makes some that I just feel like he's cataloging. Yeah? Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so a number of things just came up there. One thing is that you've been threatening for a number of years, like, you're done. That's the end of it all.
Well, George Lucas threatens he's going to make an experimental movie too.
Well, so one question would be, if you're done, then what are you going to do instead? And then also, do you really think that? Do you think, and you're done because why? You've run out of ideas? Okay, so that's one set of questions. And the other one is I was thinking about who's going to archive this stuff. So yeah, I think you should at least try to send out your polite letter.
Well, all my stuff is stored at the Netherlands Film Archive, so I can be assured that it's all going to be underwater in 50 years.
Dutch are really good about.
So that's.
And the other one is, yeah. You were talking about the varied style. Oh, varied styles. See, I would disagree. I think that there's a number of themes. I don't know that I would read a book about films, but there are a number of themes throughout your movies, your films, that are similar, and they aren't all in the same film, and they're not. But there's a lot of similar stuff there. If someone really wanted to sit down and write a book about it.
Yeah, well, I agree. I mean, my view is I make films that are very varied, but if you look at them, they all look like one of my films, even though they might be completely different from each other. But underneath it is my eye and maybe my sense of time, and what I'm told is my bad capacity for telling stories. That I don't know how to tell stories, and I say, well, I can tell a story. I know how to. A lot of my films will leave people in tears. Well, somehow something's working, even if it isn't told the same old way, right? Anyway, there was something.
What are you going to do? What are you going to do once you stop doing this?
What will I do? Well, I have no idea when I'm going to keel over and die. It could be tomorrow, or it could be 10 years from now, or it could be 20 years from now. I like to paint. I write a lot. I've had people tell me I should organize some of my blogs as books because, and I've looked at them and I agree that with some editing, I certainly have a few books that have already been printed on the net in the form of blogs, and if I could, I'd like to learn how to do nothing, but so far I've failed in that endeavor because my brain just is like, maybe not thinking, but something else. I have a hyperactive, overactive thing, and you can't sit tight for 10 minutes and not do anything. But there are other things to do aside from making films or videos. Although I do have a backlog, I have in some hard disks, I have at least 50 hours of highly experimental looking stuff, which if I took my bother, I could organize and say, here's this experimental film, and here's that one, and here's this. And it's all very beautiful stuff, but nobody's ever seen it. Not because I didn't try to show it, but because, I'm pretty much in film people's minds, I'm billed as some kind of new narrative, a fiction, new narrative filmmaker. And if I make something that's completely abstract, or like I have an extremely beautiful film which called Bowman Lake, where I went to Bowman Lake in Glacier National Park, and I sat there all day long from sunrise to sunset and shot shots, and it's like a 2 hour and 20-minute long film where you see a single shot of Bowman Lake, but it's not pixelated. I hate pixelating that way. And it just looks like real natural time, except the light comes and goes, and there's a little wind on the lake, and so it's choppy, and then it's glassy, and then the light does this, and the light does that, but all very slowly, because there's like 2 minute, there's shots of 5 minutes, and there's a 1.5 minute dissolve getting from one shot to the other, so you don't see a dissolve, you just see a slight compression of a whole day in a way that you would never sit there and look at a lake that way. In reality, you'd be too distracted by other things. But in a cinema for two hours, you just look at this stunning, gorgeous play of light and water and the mountains and everything. Nobody's shown it. What can I do? And it's way too late in the game for me to go groveling, right? It's like, okay.
I think I can speak for the rest of the staff here. We would love to have you back and show some more of your films.